All right. So, welcome to the podcast, Erin.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you for having me. We've already warmed up a little bit, so I'm so excited to continue the conversation for everybody to join with us.
Yeah, for sure. So, can you share your background, how you ended up finding your calling in fertility yoga?
Yes, so it was a bit of an indirect path. A lot of us in this professional space have our own journeys, if you will, that led us to want to heal ourselves and then support others in this space. Mine was a little bit indirect, starting with I didn't have my relationship to what a mother was, right? As a child, I
Mm-hmm.
like an abandoned child in a lot of ways. And so I've always been seeking healing around that, right? Like, what is the mother? How do I mother myself, and
Mm-hmm.
this whole relationship. Well, anyways, that led me to needing some really deep healing in my early 20s. And that's when I found yoga. And yoga changed everything for me. And how I was able to cope, how I was able to show up, how I was able to grow and heal. And it was life changing for me. So that's when I decided, instead of being on the path to be a vet, which I was,
Mm-hmm.
I was on track to be a veterinarian. I completely shifted, and this was like before we had yoga pants. So for me to like declare out loud, I'm going to be a yoga teacher,
That's great.
a little bit strange at the time,
Mm-hmm.
but I knew right from, and like you do, you just know,
Mm-hmm.
and so that led me to the next kind of significant event being having my daughter. And when I was pregnant, who's now 12, and when I was pregnant with her, I looked around and I realized there were what women need during this phase in our life like didn't exist. The, a deep community focused on actual practices that are nourishing and supportive, and not just what the doctors are saying, right? Like intuitive practices. And specifically around yoga, I'm like, oh my God, why can't I find pregnancy yoga? So I decided to create it. A lot of times we get creative and we need things out of
Mm-hmm.
necessity. And
Yeah.
started a company where I was going to support women on all phases of motherhood in this season. And that's when Dr. Robert Keltz at CNY Fertility found me, and we found each other. And he asked me to come aboard his practice and start an integrative clinic. So I partnered with him, and then we began offering acupuncture, yoga, massage, nutrition, all the things that are just as important for fertility as actual treatment. And yeah, the rest is history. I did that for over a decade in person, and now I brought my work online because I knew my mission was broader, and I wanted to be able to support women all over the world. So that's how we're here today.
That's an amazing story. And it really is a calling. It kind of comes, I consider it to be like an inspired thought, something that just kind of lands on your mind and you're like, oh, that's interesting. But I feel like it's more than just that. I really do feel like it's a calling and something that chooses you and aligns with you. And then obviously we have free will, so we can choose to listen or we could choose to ignore it, and you chose to listen, which is awesome.
Yeah, and it's like one of these things that, looking back, no one would wish what I experienced as a child, like on my life. But I realize is now, like, it allowed me to do the work I do, and give my gifts and bring my gifts to the surface of what I can offer to the world. So I look back at it with gratitude, for sure.
That's amazing. Really inspiring, actually. And what's interesting, as you were talking, I was thinking about Guan Yin. Have you ever learned about Guan Yin?
No.
You would be so intrigued by Guan Yin. She's kind of like the female energy of Buddha, and she's the goddess of fertility, but she's also the goddess of compassion, which I
Hmm.
find so interesting. In Chinese medicine, the heart and the uterus have this beautiful connection. And so there's
Yes.
this open space in the heart, um, you know, opens up the uterus basically and allows more life in. So she's this goddess that people used to pray to during new moon and full moon uh, in order to get pregnant. So this is back in history in China. What's interesting about Guan Yin is she's like this mother goddess energy. She's this
Mm,
mother energy. And I've had times where I've really needed that energy
mm,
when I was pregnant my first time. And I remember just feeling this need to connect with that energy. And so one day I just got into this deep meditation and I literally felt, I really do think those energies are around us, even though they're invisible. You can
yes.
actually tap into it because what made me think about this is when you said, how do I mother myself? Like, where do I get
Mhm.
that? Well, that mother energy is there for you, like at all times, for everybody, really. We can actually tune into it with meditation. So I'm thinking Guan Yin for you.
I'll add her to my, like, when I reach out, and I do that when I call them like nature baths. That's where I feel like the most connected to
Yeah.
that mothering energy, where I just feel so unconditionally loved and supported. And so I'll add her into my
Yeah. Well,
channeling
who knows?
her.
She's probably in your life and you just didn't get,
Didn't even know.
know specifically. But what's interesting too is as you benefit from it, as all healers, we benefit and we heal at the same time. So like
Yeah.
so it's great also for your practice and for, incorporating, because I just love that energy of that for fertility, anything really.
Yeah, and as you were saying, the connection from the heart to the uterus, one of the yoga poses that I offer pretty much in every sequence that I've created for fertility and offer in a practice is called Supta Baddha Konasana. And it's where we sit with the feet together, knees wide, and we support our torso. We lay back over a bolster so the shoulder blades can drop. So we have this beautiful opening across the heart and opening across our low pelvis and uterus at the same time. And it's a very vulnerable position, to have all of that open at the same time. So usually I offer blankets or, some weight,
Yeah.
sandbags, even to help you hold that posture, feel safe in that posture. But yeah, so that connection is so, so important. So like probably the most important
Yep.
energetics that acupuncture and yoga and all these energy medicines can offer. So yeah, we do that almost every posture, every
That's
class.
amazing. So I was going to actually ask, so what, for people who haven't really learned about fertility yoga, what makes fertility yoga different than other types of yoga? And I know that there's a huge range even within yoga, but what's different about fertility yoga?
Yeah, so in fertility yoga, we honor our body and our cycles. So for women, I work with women, so I'll although yoga can be supportive for male fertility as well. I've chosen to specialize in the mother. So what we're doing is cultivating practices that are nourishing for different parts of the cycle. So for instance, during menses, it's a time of kind of drawing in, it's a time of gathering, nourishing. We need that nourishing. It's kind of like going in, more yin, I guess,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And we have, after our period, if our cycles are regulated, we have our follicular phase up to ovulation, where it's like more energizing. We want the blood flow to like move, and we're moving energy. And it's a time where we can have our practices, or even the yoga practice, be more vigorous.
Mm-hmm.
So like people who like flow practices, that's a really good time. And we can do the deep twists, and we can do all the poses that are would be contraindicated during pregnancy. And then we ovulate, and whether you're doing procedures or trying naturally, however you're trying to conceive, after that point, right, there could be pregnancy happening. So it's the next phase, and we have to have practices that are mirroring what's happening and what we want to happen from the inside out, right? And and then we start the cycle over, or we, then move into pregnancy. But it's an honoring of where we're at, what we're needing emotionally, physically. And, during our period, there's either, it can be either or. Like a lot of times it's a celebratory time,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of the time it's a grieving time, so it's an opportunity to match emotionally, physically, mentally, and honoring that, to move it through. Because as soon as we hold on to that stuff, we're creating blocks, and
That's
we
right.
want to stay nice and open. And the other thing is, there's just a lot of, especially the reproductive technology, IUI, IVF, there's a lot at stake, right? We've invested a lot financially, all the time, all the appointments, and you want to have practices that are safe. So, all the practices I do are kind of like creating recipes, right? They're like recipes for just what you're needing. And the day before retrieval, or, leading up to retrieval, is very different than after a transfer. And it is important to move. It is important to not let fear you create that rigidity and holding in your body. So it's important to move, but it's also important to move in a way that's nourishing. And that's what yoga for fertility can offer.
Right.
And a lot of times in yoga, a lot of practices and teachers don't honor the menstrual cycle, right? We're not paying any attention. And we're actually, a lot of times with what's offered, is working against the natural energy flow of the body, and like what your body is needing energetically too. So we're working to create the flow.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you. I mean, it's really important to actually do that. And I too work in cycles when I administer herbs and Chinese medicine, and there's definitely such wisdom in doing that, because we are cyclical creatures and we do really need that. And I was going to ask, do you do breathing exercises also, or meditations?
Yes. So all the meditations I offer are all about removing blocks. So whether it's needing clarity, or you're needing to, release something that's a cycle that didn't work, or a trauma. There's so much trauma and that can go along with, especially if you've been struggling for a long time. So how do you release some of that stuff? How do you find clarity? How do you where do you find a way forward? How do you find a way forward? And the meditations I offer are all healing, helping guided healings to get you through, to kind of have those breakthroughs from the inside out, kind of like reworking where you're at. So we do lots of, and then a lot of mindfulness meditation too, just to get back in the positive. And the breathing is, that is yoga, right? Always coming back to the breath and allowing the breath to lead. Finding your breath and then allowing it to lead. Yeah, for sure.
It is an amazing thing. I mean, the breath is everything. And you had mentioned doing something after transfer. And you mentioned about like not being so stiff and fearful, because that does happen. And people are afraid to move. They're afraid to do anything to ruin it, or, to lose. So how do you work with that? And what do you suggest?
Yeah. So first of all, in my teachings, I really work to cultivate and work to help women connect with their intuition and find their confidence. Right. And we talk about one step at a time, right? All we have to know is the next step. And when you can break it down to that small of a bite, it's way easier to feel confident and feel like you'll know, right? And then you have to work, I work really hard to show up in a way that cultivates trust, right? So you don't want to be led or guided by by someone you don't trust, you know?
Of course.
So I think by exemplifying what it is to trust and then leading, you know, by small bits, you know, and then just rewiring a lot of what the medical language, we used a lot of like different words, try to, you know,
Yes.
I mean, the whole Western medical system is a lot of fear-based thinking. Like everything is
Absolutely.
catastrophic thinking, and even the words around that. So when we tap back into our knowing, our sense of knowing, I mean, that is the most powerful stance that we can possibly assume, you know.
It really is. It really is. And what's interesting too is like you had mentioned the breath, and I'm hearing you talking about the breath and also movement and also intention with the meditation. And those things are such powerful recipe ingredients because the breath, I feel like, because I meditate a lot and sometimes I'll get inspired thought. We were talking about inspired thought, like things just come to us. And you know the difference between things that come to us versus just our mind racing, the monkey mind. And when we get quiet, that's when things come through into our minds and we become like more of a channel. And we're talking, and so one of the things that actually recently came to me is that everything resides in the breath, that you can find everything in your life, before, future, past, everything, by just tuning in your breath. If you listen to your breath, like fully with your intent and presence, you can find out so much about your state and everything in your body. And it's interesting because if you think about it, I mean, I can take extreme examples. When you're stressed out, you'll start to constrict your breath. Or if you're really relaxed by the beach and you have this perfect day where the weather's perfect and you're not thinking about a care in the world, your breath is free. You know, it's all these things. And so, but what's interesting about breath is that you can actually, even though it's involuntary and involuntary at the same time.
Yes.
It's
Right.
voluntary and involuntary. So
It's
you
a
can
choice.
actually,
It's a choice. We have choice with it, right?
yes. And so we can actually affect the brain. We can communicate back to the brain through pranayama. I find it so fascinating. It's like
And
such
there's
an
so much
ancient wisdom.
science now. Right? And there's so like all this wisdom that we're talking about. There's science now that goes along to show us how breathing like you're talking about, rewires the brain, how, and quickly, so quickly, like you don't have to sit there in meditation for hours, you know. I mean, it's minutes. It's minutes.
Yeah.
And it's like we have so much power to impact our direction, and that's my message, right? Because it's so nice to have technology, right? And all this cool medical stuff. But the truth is that no matter what the choices are, what that technology enables, it still has to come, that openness and freedom and creative essence has to come from within. So we need to get that.
And let's not forget that we are the source of technology. We are the source of everything we see in front of us. We rely on the branch, but we are the source. Our intention or intuition, everything got derived from, sourced from us. And we forget that sometimes. And that's why I love yoga so much, because it brings you back to that source.
Yeah. And so it's just this beautiful process of you know, allowing emotions to move through, awakening to possibility, and then choosing to do this in a different way, right? So I talk a lot about how when a fertility journey is, you know, it's a journey because there's challenges. Everyone has different challenges, and within that there's opportunity for receiving and growing and all these things. So when you pair that with a yoga practice, what happens then is the emotional roller coaster becomes less of a roller coaster. You know, you have you move through things quicker, right? Like what could be years or months, all of a sudden, like you just got it, right? It's like, okay, let the waves come. The waves are going to come, right?
Right.
But are you going to, kick and scream or try to run away, or are you just going to let it wash over you and grow and heal and move on? So this is stuff that serves my clients and students forever. This is stuff that's you have to learn at some point in life. But this season of what it is to be a mother and how you're mothering yourself, and back to that is
I love that. How you're mothering yourself.
Yeah, one of the hardest, most challenging, most riddled with opportunity phases of our life. And so that's what I'm here for. This is such a rich, the process in itself is fertile, right?
I love that.
That's the finding of fertility in all of this it's part of the process, all of it.
Right. It's life-giving.
It's life-giving. Yeah. When we allow it, when we open to it, and then stop giving our power away.
Yes. That's amen to that. And also, yeah, we absolutely do.
Powerful. Mothers are like, that we are the most that is the most powerful role, whether you're mothering yourself or whoever you're mothering, because we're all mothering in some ways.
Yes, absolutely. I look at Oprah, she mothered a whole movement, she didn't have children. She chose not to have children, but she mothered a whole movement. My God, she mothered like the ultimate mother.
Right. Yes. So, and then I hope that I like to think my work is then supporting future generations too, right? Because when we learn how to take care of ourselves and be that mother for ourselves, and not just in the role of like having a baby, but just more of a broader mothering, then it opens up so much for actual children and their children, and you're creating like a whole new basically path for them and what's possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a ripple effect. It really is. It's not just what you see in front of you. It really does have such a ripple effect. And I read on your website, you mentioned statistics from a Harvard research study on the effects of releasing emotions and sharing one's story, and how that can impact chances of fertility or getting pregnant and conception. Can you share this information? It sounds so empowering.
Yeah. So there's a Harvard researcher named Dr. Ali Domar. She is the world leader.
I love Ali. I had her actually on the podcast. She's phenomenal.
Okay. So she is like my guru without even knowing it, but she has given so much to crediting mind-body science and how it works with regards to fertility and infertility. And she has a study that shows that when you incorporate practices like meditation, yoga, group work, community, you're actually 3 times as likely to get pregnant when you're doing assisted reproductive technology. I mean, this is powerful stuff. It really, really is. And it's stuff that we have control over.
Right.
There's so much we don't have control over. All of these things, we do have choice, like we were talking about. So she has many books and many, many studies about even like depression and infertility. And when we relieve depression, increases in pregnancy rates, because depression and anxiety are rampant. For women who've been in this process, or, the level of loss and trauma, like we were talking about, is sometimes sometimes it just blows me away, what some people endure in this process is just overwhelming. So when we can start to change our mental state and our emotional state, how that impacts our physical state, we are one being. And yoga is just a really easy way to access all the layers. It's, like we're going to breathe this way and we're going to move this way. And it's just a really tangible entry point into
It is.
into some of these more abstract concepts that we've been kind of touching on, but it's very concrete, and you don't have to grasp, the unwinding process, it just happens. So then at the end of your yoga practice, all of a sudden you feel like a new person, you feel like, yeah, it's amazing.
It is. And it makes me think, because I remember Tony Robbins always talks about physiology and mind. You want to change your mind, change your physiology. And you had also touched upon the fact that it is so overwhelming. You have all these emotions and grief, and you don't know how to process them. And it really does at times feel impossible, like there's no way out. And doing something and changing your so not so much working from the place of the mind, because I feel like that could be impossible at that moment.
Right,
And
especially
moving.
if you're sitting on something, right? Like you're
Exactly. Which is
Yeah.
automatically what most people will want to do, is like just figure it out, but you can't figure it out because you're in this state and fog. So by movement, it gives you an out, or at least a way to process.
Yeah,
So
and that's why
beautifully.
I think it's dangerous when some doctors are saying don't move. Oh, let's
Yeah.
move in an educated way. Let's move in a
Oh, I
nurturing,
love that.
nourishing way. Let's look at where you are in your cycle, and again, have the movement, honor that place. So I have like a lot of women like to run to, that's their therapy, or have more vigorous practices. Okay, well, how about don't do that during your period? Allow your body to rest, renew, be nurtured, and then during your follicular phase, in the beginning, as long as you're not on too many injectables, like get a few days get a run in, before your ovaries get big,
Right.
but then do a more vigorous yoga practice. Man, you do not need, and then, and some of that stuff is like we get addicted to, right? Like we actually can find that same amount of release and opening in a more nourishing, gentle way. So it's just relearning new behaviors too. But
Yes.
I think that, like you're saying, the physiology piece, because it's an easy way to transform feelings.
Right. It sure is. And it gives the emotions, really, you do process emotions physically. I think people don't realize that. And once you get mindful, then you start to realize you're actually processing these emotions in your body. And you can feel them in your body once you start to pay attention. So by doing yoga, it's just a beautiful way, or any kind of movement, really. But I want to touch upon a myth that I hear a lot. Sometimes people will be like, oh, yoga's boring for me. They kind of assume it's just kind of like laying there and stretching. So I wanted to just touch upon that. And it really does also depend on the teacher. You can have a teacher that's not aligned with you, or you don't have chemistry with, and then assume that all yoga is going to be like that.
Yeah, for sure. So I say this to that, because I hear that too, oh, it's hard for me to sit there.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's hard. That's why we practice.
Right. I love that.
Like that's the whole perfect. If someone says it to me, I'm like, great, it's hard for you to sit there, then you need this, right? I mean, of course. Right. So, anyways, I like to say, like, okay, well, if you go to a restaurant and eat food and don't like that food, you go to another one, right? Or you try a different recipe, or you don't just not practice or eat, right? And yoga is the same way. Like, it's so dependent. There's so many different styles. There's so many different, like, just the energy of the teacher, like you were saying, so yeah. And then it really does make a difference when you have intention too, right? Like if you're trying to get pregnant and you're having problems, you're having struggles, you're going to open up to maybe some different things that you've never thought about opening up to, and trying new things. So a lot of it's getting out of comfort zones.
Oh yeah.
A lot of it's, westernized yoga and magazines, like giving people these crazy ideas about what yoga is, that it just is not what it is. So yeah, I would just say try it, just try.
Yeah.
And if it's not for you, that's fine too. But I think I have a lot of yoga converts in my community because they're like, we didn't know it could be like this, or
Exactly. Yeah, I would say it's too good to pass up too soon.
well, especially in the season of motherhood. What are you going to do when you're pregnant?
Yeah.
Seriously, what are you going to do? I mean, prenatal yoga is it's like one of the best possible things you can do as a
Yeah.
mom for not only yourself, but for your baby. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, totally. And the hip openers to prepare
Preparing
for
yourself.
labor.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, so a lot of women who don't like yoga during this season of their life specifically turn to yoga. And that's okay. I think that's another good lesson, as we move through life, not all practices are whatever we're relying on is we have to be willing to change.
Yep.
I'm in my 40s now, and my yoga practice looks very different now than it did, 20 years ago, even. So we have to get out of our heads about like what we think is right for us, or what we, and actually be willing to step into something new.
Well, it certainly keeps you looking young, that's for sure.
Oh,
It really, but I have to say, it really does. I mean, think about all the breath work that, most people don't really know how to breathe.
oh, it's
And
crazy.
oxygen's important, as we know.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's crazy how just a simple breathing exercise can change everything. Yeah. So hopefully we've inspired people to be
Yes.
willing to open up to.
I think so. I think so. Well, speaking of inspiration, can you share an inspiring story from one of your students?
Yes. So I actually have one in mind. Her name is Danielle. And I actually just got this letter in the mail from her. In her story, she was actually experiencing secondary infertility and had already been through years of treatment, had a loss after her first child, was already deep into, work with a fertility doctor, and then found Fertile Hope Yoga. Let me just read this to you, and then I'll share her verse story. But it's really inspirational. I wanted to drop you a note and appreciation for all that you have done for me. Know that you are appreciated and you are making a difference in the world. I think that there are special angels that take care of fertility warriors like me, and you are definitely one. Your care and compassion for your tribe is apparent, and I can say without a doubt that the last 6 months of my journey were so much easier because of the yoga and Fertile Hope Yoga.
Oh,
I learned so much from your program and will apply it to all aspects of my life. Thank you for being part of my bump squad and for helping me bring forth my dream of expanding my family. So she actually put a down payment on 2 IVF, she straight up paid for 2 IVF cycles. And as she was getting ready for, doing all the prepping and everything, she found out she was pregnant on her own. So I hope she gets that refund.
I hope so too.
But yeah, and I everything changed for her, when she started in these knowing practices. And this is not, people talk about, oh, well, those kind of stories, we hear about them, but they don't actually happen. I can tell you that they happen all the time, and you don't know.
Yeah.
Unless you have a sperm donor, or, don't have an opportunity in whatever your situation is at home to conceive at home, you don't know. You don't know. All things are possible. All things are possible.
They really are. And we are so much more powerful than we think.
Yes. I mean, I don't care if you're like a donor, using a donor egg, and then, I've seen that situation, one donor egg baby, and then they come back for another and they're pregnant, on their own. So we just don't know. We have to the idea is to stay open to possibilities and know one step after the other. You just have to know the next step. That's it. Absolutely. And that knowing comes from within.
And a lot of times it's very human nature to base what the future or expect a future based on our past. And especially if the past has been many years of trying. But I've seen people with like an 8-year past of trying to get pregnant and getting pregnant at 46 with a healthy child. I mean, and this is why I feel like it's so important for the listeners to hear this, because, and I love the fact that you have hope in your name. It's beautiful because it really, fertile hope, growing hope.
Yeah. Anything's possible. And that's when people come into my program, it's like, I don't even question whether it's going to happen. It's more like, how can I support them and make this easier, lighter, faster for them? That's because it's like, I already know, I don't question whether it's going to happen anymore.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
It's so long, that, and like, you can't convince me. You just can't.
Yeah.
You can tell me everything, and it can be like the hardest story I've ever heard, but you're still not going to convince me.
Yeah.
I still hold hope for you.
And I really do see, I do think that makes a difference too, because I feel like our energy as facilitators of any kind of healing, it really makes a difference on how we see it. And when you were talking before about a lot of Western medicine is very much in this doubt kind of place. It's kind of void of spirit. I mean, they don't consider the spirit. They consider just the physiology. And not to put them down, because I know that there's a place for everything, but I do see it happen often. And there is a culture within that. Not everybody, there's some amazing ones, but there is a culture that is very limited belief.
Yeah, we just have to know. You just have to know what you're dealing with is all, right? So when you know what you're dealing with, then you can say, okay, this is great information. I'm so grateful for this technology.
Right.
I'm still not going to take my power away, right? It's still
absolutely like, I'm not gonna believe this. You can't. I'm not gonna believe that. I'm gonna either get a second opinion or listen to my intuition.
Or find someone who's going to be on your team. That's, you want to be your team, your acupuncturist, your yoga teacher, your doctors, they need to be they're on your team.
That's
not
right.
the other way around.
Yes. Words of wisdom. Absolutely. So is there a tip you'd like to share with the listeners?
A tip? Just stay true to yourself.
I like that.
It's so easy to get lost and feel like you don't know, you're not on, you don't feel like you're on the road, So just know that even if you feel that way, it can be a few breaths to feel like you're back on track. You're not that far. You're really not. It's usually when you get back into your body, you realize that quickly. And if you are feeling lost, there's so many women, there's so many practitioners who are here for you, that this journey is not meant to be done alone, I don't believe.
Yeah.
So finding a community, finding practitioners, finding your team, your community is so, so important.
Absolutely. I love that. So thank you so much for coming on. Also, how can people find you?
Oh, yes. My website is the easiest, fertilehopeyoga.com. I have lots of free resources. I have paid resources, whatever you're needing. I've got it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Erin, for coming on. This is an awesome conversation, and I'm sure it's inspired so many people. So thank you again for your wisdom and your wonderful information.
Thank you, Michelle. So fun. Thank you. I hope everyone gets a boost of encouragement to try something new and, keep going for sure.